Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started in just a minute or two. My name is Marie Keister, and we're really excited that you're joining us this morning to hear Ohio's report card for infrastructure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marie Keister, and I am going to be your moderator this morning as we launch and reveal Ohio's report card for infrastructure. So if you'll just stand by, we'll get started in probably another minute. Good morning, everyone. I'm watching as the participants are logging on. We're up to 90, 95 almost. I just want to give people another 30, 60 seconds to log on, and then we'll get started. So we are just about to get started, and we already have a question about whether this morning will be recorded and posted somewhere. And yes, we'll be providing you a link in just a little bit that tells you where you'll be able to find this recording. My name is Marie Keister, and I am part of the team that has worked closely with ASCE Ohio to report today the findings of Ohio's report card for Ohio infrastructure. I would like to turn it over for a welcome from Craig Heberbrand, who is president of the Ohio Council.
Thank you, Marie. My name is Craig Heberbrand. As president of the Ohio Council of the American Society of Civil Engineers, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the unveiling of the 2021 report card for Ohio's infrastructure. The first in more than a decade, the Ohio Infrastructure Report Card was a considerable undertaking. I would like to thank Committee Chair Dr. Charles Sawyer for his leadership and the more than 30 dedicated civil engineers who volunteered their time to deliver this report. The 16 categories of infrastructure addressed in the report illustrate the breadth of disciplines within the civil engineering profession and the critical role that infrastructure plays in our daily lives. The report card has been peer-reviewed by the Committee on America's Infrastructure. I would like to thank Christy Prouty, Senior Manager of Infrastructure Initiatives, and the Committee on America's Infrastructure for her diligence in thoroughly reviewing each chapter of every report card, ensuring they meet ASCE's high standards and are consistent from state to state. For each of the 16 categories, the report card provides an assessment of the infrastructure across the entire state and is not intended to grade any individual infrastructure provider. A part of ASCE's mission is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. The Ohio Infrastructure Report Card was created as a public service for citizens and policymakers to provide a clear picture of the infrastructure needs and conditions. ASCE volunteers spent more than a year interviewing owners, reviewing reports, and condensing reams of data into an easy-to-read assessment of Ohio's civil infrastructure systems. Ohio's report card is modeled after America's report card and uses the same familiar school report card format. The 2017 Infrastructure Report Card gave America's infrastructure a D+. The 2021 America's Infrastructure Report Card will be released on March 3rd. Today, you're going to hear from a great lineup of speakers, offering local, state, and national perspectives on Ohio's infrastructure. Our speakers include U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, Chairman of the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, U.S. Representative Troy Balderson, who represents Ohio's 12th District and serves on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, Jim Pike, registered professional engineer, a past president and current treasurer of the Ohio Council. He is also a member of the ASCE National Public Policy Committee. Lloyd McAdam, registered professional engineer and registered professional surveyor and chief engineer at the Ohio Department of Transportation. Boris Slogar, registered professional engineer and chief engineer at the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District. And India L. Birdsong, general manager and chief executive officer of the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. After their remarks, we will open the microphones to the media so that they may have an opportunity to ask our panelists questions. If time remains, we'll open the floor to allow others to ask questions. To get us started, it is my honor to introduce United States Senator Sherrod Brown, Chairman of the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. Senator Brown.
Okay, if you want to stand by for a minute, we'll be pulling up his remarks. While we're standing by, Jerry Marks, here we go.
I'm Sherrod Brown. It's an honor to serve you in Ohio. Thank you for giving me that opportunity over the last almost decade and a half. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. Thanks for the work that you do to improve Ohio's infrastructure and to keep our systems in good order. For years, American infrastructure was the envy of the world, but for too long now, we have simply failed to invest the necessary resources in our nation's roads and bridges and schools and water and sewer systems and technology. Congress has an opportunity now to pass an infrastructure bill that creates good paying, often union jobs in our communities while ensuring safe and more efficient transportation, upgrading our water and sewer systems, and investing in broadband. It means better schools with latest technology. It means more energy efficient buildings with lower utility bills. Your report shows just how badly that investment in Ohio is needed. In the year ahead, I plan to work with President Biden and my colleagues in Ohio and both parties to enact a major infrastructure bill and reauthorize our highway and public transportation programs so we can finally have a transportation and infrastructure system that will be robust, sustainable, and equitable for years into the future. We need to have robust investment in bridge repair, like my Bipartisan Bridge Investment Act, which would help us repair the large, medium, and small bridges that are essential to everyday life throughout our communities. That legislation comes directly from the feedback and conversations I've had with you and your organization, so thank you for that. It's also clear we need to strengthen our nation's public transportation system. That will be a key part of what I do as the new chair of the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. By strengthening our infrastructure now, we create jobs for workers at a time when they need the help the most, stimulate the economy, protect our environment, help revitalize Ohio. We need to make sure we have strong Buy America rules for all federally supported infrastructure projects. If there are tax dollars, American tax dollars, we ought to be buying American with American steel and American technology and American products and American workers, including American professional engineers. President Biden is already taking an important step to make that Buy America happen. Without Buy American rules, we are allowing manufacturers to go elsewhere at the expense of our taxpayers. We need bipartisan legislation to ensure that steel and manufactured products used in all federally supported infrastructure programs will be manufactured exclusively in the United States. I'm committed to working with President Biden and my colleagues in Congress to invest in our state's infrastructure needs, to create jobs for American workers, to get our nation moving again. It's the best way as we come out of this pandemic. It's the best way to build our economy with good paying jobs that everyone will benefit from. To all of you, your speaking out really matters. So keep speaking out, keep standing up for this, keep pushing members of Congress. They need to feel the pressure from you to get a big infrastructure bill through this Congress. So thank you so much for your engagement and your public spirit in this.
So thank you so much to Senator Sherrod Brown for participating today. And now it is my honor to introduce Congressman Troy Balderson from the 12th District and also on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Congressman?
Marie, good morning, and thank you very much for having me. Craig, thank you for your leadership with the organization. I want to do a shout out to Boris. You work with one of my closest friends, Mr. Butler, and glad to see you over there with Craig and his leadership at the Watershed. I was really excited when he received his new role there. So, you know, I want to emphasize what the senator said. And communicate, you know, the need for some of this infrastructure. We talk about it a lot. I have to say that it's a little frustrating sometimes, but I keep focused and I keep my head down, and we're going to get through this. I mean, one of the main reasons that I wanted to get on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee was to be bipartisan and to work with colleagues across the aisle, because we all can agree that we know that our roads and bridges and our water and our sewer and our rural broadband all need dire attention right now. I position myself to build those relationships, and I don't look as my colleagues as a D or an R. I break them down and I'll Google them if I'm sitting in the committee and just kind of see where they're from, get their background, have an understanding of their districts. I match up with several other Congress people that have a similar area that I represent in the 12th Congressional District. So that's kind of how I go about it. It's been pretty successful for me. In the last Congress, I was able to work with Lizzie Fletcher on some pipeline issues. And, you know, you all don't see that on TV. You know, there's 200 of us there that are really working hard and are really focused on getting things done. And we want to take accomplishments and back to our districts, but we want our districts to be successful and to motivate and to move. Chairman DeFazio in the last Congress was very motivated. We had a great start to the committee with public, you know, forums and panels and just talking about what we can do with our infrastructure and how we go about funding it. We all know that we have to use other resources, how we fund our infrastructure. So I think that was important. The public-private partnership piece, a P3 piece, you know, we had that great conversation. So, you know, in this new Congress that we just started a month ago now, you know, Chairman DeFazio had the same enthusiasm and vigor that he had beforehand, because he wants to be that chairman to lead us to a bipartisan bill to get this infrastructure package done. I look forward to working with Chairman DeFazio. He's getting a little bit more frustrated by what's going on. Last night we had a markup. It was very partisan, unfortunately. You know, it lasted almost 10 hours. And just because the Republicans were trying to get amendments into the end of the markup, and we were unsuccessful getting those done. So again, look, we're going to keep on doing this, and I'm going to keep on working. I'm going to work, you know, build relationships. I'm reaching out to all of you and communicate with our office. It's important. I mean, you all are in this on a day-to-day operations, and this is what you do for a living. So it's important that you communicate with me. Nate Zinfer is our policy person for transportation infrastructure. He's also our legislative director. Nate has a great passion for this also. So Marie, that's kind of what I wanted to do. I told you beforehand, you know, it's about questions and answers for me, and we could go down through a whole bunch of stuff that we'd like to see done, but it's important that I respond to your folks. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Congressman. And just a couple of quick technical notes. Some of us were able to hear the video, but maybe not all of you. And so in the recording later, if for some reason you're finding that it is not working, you can reach out to us and we'll give you a copy of that video. Some of you have had some freezing on your screens. I've not seen it on my end, so it may be your link. So anyway, bear with us. So thank you, Congressman. And now I'd like to introduce Jim Pike, PE, past president of ASCE Ohio Council and the Central Ohio section. Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Congressman Balderson, for those thoughts. So let's dive into the grades and how they were developed. While key points will be provided here, a detailed analysis can be found in the full report card, which will be available soon at infrastructurereportcard.org/Ohio. In total, the infrastructure report card assessed 16 areas. As Craig previously mentioned, the grading scale uses a simple school card format with the possibility of grades ranging from A to F. It should be noted that the ultimate goal would be to obtain and maintain a B grade in all categories. From this slide, you can see what each grade denotes. To assign that grade, each infrastructure category is analyzed based on 8 criteria. They are capacity, condition, this evaluates its existing and near future physical status, funding, which looks at current sources and levels, future need, operations and maintenance, public safety, this looks at to what extent is the public impacted by its condition, resilience, examples would be if a flood potentially wipes out a roadway, or freezing temperatures result in a water main break, or even man-made events, and innovation. In regard to innovation, the report shows that Ohio has been making a concerted effort to modernize its systems in recent years. Innovative measures have been applied particularly on its roads and through its energy grid. However, the state cannot become overly consumed with next generation technology while ignoring current needs. Practical applications and efficiency mechanisms can be applied today, even as technology evolves. So what are Ohio's grades? Ohio ASCE members determined the range from B to D, and in many cases were very similar to the most recent 2017 ASCE National Report Card. The overall statewide grade is a C-. The 2017 national average was a D+. The best grades in the categories are rail and solid waste. There are diverse programs in Ohio for solid waste management, and they provide many options for recovery and disposal. Most landfills are self-funded through waste collection fees, and a large portion of this revenue goes directly to operations and maintenance, making it self-sustaining. Ohio's rail network also performed well. Rail lines are integrated closely with the state economy, carrying about 289 million tons of freight annually. Ohio ranks 4th in the nation for total miles of track and 2nd in the nation in the number of intermodal terminal facilities. Cross connectivity with ports on the east and west coasts is an important factor in this category's success. The lowest grades went to roads, transit, and levees, each of which received a D. Ohio maintains one of the most extensive and heavily traveled roadway systems in the nation. It boasts rankings of 2nd in the nation in number of bridges, 3rd largest in freight volume, 4th for total interstate lane miles, and 6th largest in total vehicle miles traveled. This is a lot to maintain. In 2019, the governor and state legislator increased the funding potential for roads and transit. But with fewer people driving due to COVID-19, motor fuel tax revenues fell short of original projections. The chief engineer at the Ohio Department of Transportation will speak more on this shortly. We'll also hear from the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Agency. Statewide transit agencies have seen a trend of decreased state funding for years. Implications include rolling back service frequency to balance with available operating funds and maintaining a greater volume of older vehicles. In addition, levee systems are vitally important. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers estimates that more than 151,000 people and $27.5 billion in property are protected by Ohio's levee systems. The average age of levees in the state is 47 years, which is nearing the end of their projected design life of 50 years. To raise Ohio's infrastructure grade, ASCE developed several recommendations that fall into 3 categories. These are further investment, continued leadership and planning, and making concerted efforts to prepare for the future. The full report will discuss specific recommendations to each Ohio category that was evaluated. Now, to give you more of a state perspective in the transportation area, I'd like to introduce Lloyd McAdam, Chief Engineer of Odot. Lloyd?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Senator Brown and Congressman Balderson, for setting the stage for us here. So, I'd just like to tell you the story here at ODOT. So I apologize for Director Jack Marksbanks not being able to be with us today. He's actually working with the state legislature right now, working on the budget, our current budget at this time. So he was unable to be here with us. But I'm happy to be here reporting on an ASCE event. I remember my days back at the University of Akron, riding in my concrete canoe as my old ASCE chapter. So it's great stuff. Infrastructure is obviously the lifeblood of our economy. It's how goods get to manufacturing plants and stores. It's how we get to employment, school, medical services, or a fun weekend event at one of Ohio's many outdoor activities. Unlike wine, infrastructure does not get better with age. It requires a constant investment of time and money. We've seen the effects of the infrastructure in disrepair, and fortunately, Governor Mike DeWine and the Ohio General Assembly recognized the dire position that it could put our state in. Their foresight to increase the motor fuel tax, which is by far the main source of funding for ODOT. You should know that 98% of ODOT's funding, ODOT's revenue comes from the federal and state gas taxes, 98%. Their foresight to increase this motor fuel tax, which is by far our main funding source, allowed us to continue maintaining our roads and bridges while also increasing the investment into the safety projects and the ways to improve the reliability of our transportation system and network. Of course, back in 2019, we could have never foresaw what was going to happen in 2020. Last year, traffic volumes for the entire state for the entire year were down 15.5% on average. 15.5%. Obviously, when people are driving less, they're buying less fuel. Therefore, there's less revenue coming to both the state and local governments that are relying on this funding from the motor vehicle user fee. Passenger vehicle traffic has yet to recover back to 2019 levels. But surprisingly, between June of 2020 and today, the truck traffic is actually up significantly in the state of Ohio. And I think we all recognize why. A lot more people are buying things online, a lot more people having things delivered for us. And so it's obviously helping us from a revenue standpoint in that fashion. Certainly fewer vehicles on the road have meant fewer gallons of gasoline being purchased and diesel being pumped at lower revenues for us. From March to November, gas tax revenues for ODOT have been down about $198 million from originally anticipated levels. Despite that, we've been able to continue funding every one of our preservation maintenance projects. What that means is every one of our bridge projects, every one of our pavement projects throughout the state have been funded. And we've also been able to keep every one of our local programs 100% fully funded so that our local governments can take advantage of those. Those local government programs include the Small Cities Funds, the County Engineers Association of Ohio, both bridge and safety and STP funds, the local major bridge program funds, the safety program, which is now increased to $156 million a year, which is the fourth largest safety program in the country, and other programs such as the Safe Routes to School program. So the good news is we were able to simply move a couple of our large major new track projects and delay them with this decrease in revenue and basically bring them back in once we get some additional dollars from once the revenue comes back and we get the additional dollars. This is only possible because of the gas tax increase in 2019. Without it, we estimate that our funding gap today would have been nearly $900 million. The only impact that we've seen, basically is to move out our large, major new and track projects, as I mentioned earlier. At ODOT, we've been able to invest heavily in our roads and our bridges in recent years. These investments have resulted in a bridge inventory that boasts an average of a general appraisal of 7 on a 0 to 9 scale. So we're excited about that. So our average structure in the state of Ohio is at a 7, which is obviously a good bridge. Our pavement conditions has a rating of nearly 85 on a scale of 0 to 100. While this is worth bragging about, there's still more work to be done. We certainly appreciate the efforts of ASCE and other groups continuing to raise awareness of the importance of infrastructure and the needs for improvement. And we are here to continue to have the best economy in the world. We must strive to have the best infrastructure in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. And now it's my privilege to also introduce Boris Slogar, also PE and Chief Engineer of the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you to Senator Brown and Representative Balderson. I will certainly pass your salutation on to Director Butler at our agency. We're fortunate to live in a state with rich and robust water resources. Unlike our neighbors out west and even down south, where billions are spent to conserve a dwindling resource, here in the Buckeye State, dams are a frontline defense for flood fighting and managing runoff. Reservoirs behind dams provide us with water supply and in many cases, a source of recreation. Levees protect villages, cities, and critical infrastructure. Dam and levee building was at its peak in the 60s and 70s, and like any man-made structure, they must be maintained and upgraded or safely decommissioned and removed. As Lloyd mentioned, they do not age like fine wine. The impacts of increased development downstream of dams means dams that were once in the middle of nowhere have become a risk to people and infrastructure. The added stress of intense storm events occurring more frequently on top of more impervious developed areas brings increased runoff towards dams and levees. ASCE Ohio report card for dams, at least in that regard, is the C-, and other for levee and inland waterways. This assessment, which puts Ohio above the national average with relationship to dams, indicates that there is work to do. This is a slight decrease from the previous report card grade, and my understanding is that the rating criteria have been modified by ASCE. I will touch upon the recent significant investment in Ohio's dams in a moment. According to ODNR Dam Safety, there are 118 high hazard dams in Ohio, which are in poor or unsatisfactory condition. Let me repeat that, 118 high hazard dams in poor or unsatisfactory condition. High hazard means failure of the dam would likely result in a loss of human life. DNR estimates that over 300 million is needed to bring these dams up to state standards. And consider the recent dam failures in Michigan as evidence that anything can happen. Now let's get into some good news and investments here in the Buckeye State. We're fortunate in Ohio to have a competent and professional dam safety regulatory oversight at ODNR. DNR Dam Safety is meeting its mandate of inspecting about 300 dams per year, and they are well respected nationally within the state dam safety community. Millions of dollars are being spent right here in Ohio to address aging dams and levees. ODNR has spent over $330 million since 2011 on state-owned dams. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has spent over $140 million in the Muskingum watershed on its dams. And Huntington District was one of the first among the Army Corps to invest heavily in upgrading its dams right here. As a matter of fact, Huntington District is also designated as the Dam Safety Modification Mandatory Center of Expertise for all of the Army Corps right here in our backyard. My agency, the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District, has spent over $30 million in non-federal cost share with the Army Corps, with much more slated on the horizon. The Miami Conservancy District, our sister agency in the Dayton area, has spent over $23 million over the past 20 years and is currently investing more dollars on projects. Just these examples total over $500 million investment in Ohio's dams and levees. And though significant, more is needed. So what is needed to keep dams in Ohio safe for the future? Here are three things. Continue to support the state's regulatory role, DNR Dam Safety, to effectively carry out its mission and look out for the well-being of all Ohioans that could be affected by a dam failure or incident. They are the frontline workers. Support and develop other sources of grants and low-interest loans for high-hazard dam and levee owners in Ohio. Many of those 180 deficient high-hazard dams noted above need help. And continue to support federal, state, and regional agencies that own dams and levees, as well as municipal dam and levee owners, and get them access to resources required to effectively manage their portfolio of dams. Thank you, ASCE, for keeping tabs on these important infrastructure issues and for sharing the news, both good and bad.
Thank you, Boris. And now it is also my honor to introduce India Birdsong, General Manager, Chief Executive Officer of Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority.
Thanks, Marie, and good afternoon, everyone. As she mentioned, my name is India Birdsong, hailing from Cleveland here at the GCRTA. It's an extreme pleasure to be able to talk to you today about the report card that came out for Ohio and how it impacts transportation, namely public transit. Unfortunately, we are receiving a lower than acceptable grade on this report card. Receiving a D is something that I think offers a lot of opportunity for growth and improvement, and really sheds the light on some of the issues that we've known for a while in the industry, but that are starting to get a little bit more traction on a national level, which is good. As far as the state of good repair, where we are infrastructure-wise in the industry across Ohio as well as across the nation, and how that reflects on the customers and the community members that are comprised of essential workers and those that need the services most. So as I mentioned, it's pretty hard to feel good about a D. However, we have a lot of room for opportunity and a lot of room for investment, particularly from the state. In Ohio, there's been a 20-year decline in state funding for transit systems. Ohio consistently ranks as having one of the lowest per capita funding support for mass transit, and that's something I think we can definitely turn around. The state legislature has been definitely working with us. We appreciate the efforts that have been made over the past 2 years to be able to have increases in funding. We're absolutely grateful for that. However, the price ticket is quite large that remains in public transit in order for us to get to a state of good repair, especially in a legacy system, for example, here in Cleveland. Just to give you a quick snippet of an understanding of where we're coming from as far as state of good repair needs and being able to kind of uptick and keep our equipment operating in tip-top shape. We're actually looking at a $514 million price tag for capital needs for unfunded projects here in Cleveland. That's just an example. We're operating rail cars that really are at least a decade almost past their useful life. 39-year rail cars. Our mechanics has been working tirelessly and really performing miracles in order to make those cars really run at an adequate pace, and have been doing an awesome job. But at some point in time, we need to be able to replace them. This is something that's prevalent across the nation. It does not stop here in Ohio. Understanding this, we are also working toward doing great things on a regional scale to be able to look at ways to make public transit more attractive, more comfortable. And those include Wi-Fi programs, rideshare programs, as well as Columbus's smart city projects, for example. We've been doing a lot of those things. I think Jim mentioned it in the beginning, to be able to really have people invest back in transit. However, it's difficult to do so when the funding isn't always there on an annual basis. So we really ask for folks to be able to take this report card very seriously and be able to look at the recommendations that have come forth from that report card, as well as be able to see how we can invest in the future of public transit and therefore be able to invest in our communities. So with that, I ask for everyone to take this, and the state's transit systems need to become a priority for all, a priority for the annual budget, a priority for the biennium, and to be able to really think about how we can move forward past the legacy systems, state of good repair issues, and really be able to think about it in an innovative light, and at the same time be able to invest in the properties that we already have on site. Keep us in state of good repair, keep us in a positive note, and be able to look forward to work together to be able to really push public transit and provide a stable service for all that are involved. So with that, I do thank you for your time today. Look forward to the Q&A session. And thanks again for allowing Cleveland to participate in the ASCE panel.
Thank you so much, India. And thank you to all our panelists. My gosh, we've had such great information today. So we have a few questions in the box that I'll have our panelists respond to here, but I also would invite you that if you would like to ask a live question, that you can raise your hand, and I think I already see one. But very quickly, I'm going to turn to Jim Pike first. There's a couple of questions I think you can answer together. When will the Ohio report card be posted online? And I can help you with that one. I think it's just a day or two. And then on another question is, how many of these report cards are being announced around this country? How many states do this? And let's go with that. How many states do you know, Jim, roughly?
States release them at different times, different years. As Craig had alluded to, Ohio hadn't done one in over 10 years. I think in 2020, there were approximately 10 states that released report cards. Here in 21, obviously Ohio's releasing its report card. Texas just released theirs, I believe, a few weeks ago. I think West Virginia was a little bit before that. There will be a break. ASCE National will be releasing its updated report card, the 2021 National Report Card, in March. And then there'll probably be, I think there's anticipated about another 7 or 8 states later on this year. And I would hope, and Marie, to your point, I would hope that our report card should be posted within a couple of days at the website that was provided.
Yes, and I will note there's an overview brochure that is available and posted, I believe, today. So we have a couple of additional questions here. Eleanor Lamb with Transport Topics wants to know how do infrastructure challenges associated with highways and roads impact truck movement through Ohio, which is a major freight hub? What improvements need to be made with highways and roads? Lloyd, this sounds like a natural question for you.
Well, thank you, and that's a great question, Eleanor. Basically, obviously, you're exactly right. 34% of the truck traffic in Ohio just drives straight through the state. And the rest of it is basically stuff that's either coming to Ohio or originates here and goes somewhere else to the state. So traffic is a major important freight movement through there is an exciting and majorly important issue for Ohio. So the way Odot is doing this, we obviously are improving our pinch points throughout the state. And this is done through our major new program and track program. So for example, the 7071 split project in downtown Columbus is a project where we've been for now about 6 years now been updating that 7071 interchange to make sure we get all of our traffic through there, including trucks through there. We obviously built significant bypasses around our larger cities. Obviously, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus obviously have large bypasses around them that truck traffic can travel and not have to go through the urban environments there. So it's obviously very important. We keep the trucks traffic. We also make sure that we've got adequate facilities for these folks. We've got an initiative right now where we're actually trying to increase the truck parking throughout the state. And we're working with our states to the west, Indiana and Illinois, on a federal highway grant to study this and find out where we can take care of our truckers better.
Thank you, Lloyd. And I'm going to come back to you and the Congressman in just a minute. I'm going to ask you a question about electric vehicles and how that might affect funding in the future. So stand by on that. But first, I'm going to go to Jim Pike. Why did Ohio's roads, or maybe Craig, why did Ohio's roads get a D and bridges get a C+? I mentioned Jim because you're a bridge guy.
Yes. Yes. So I'll answer the bridge question. Ohio's bridges overall are doing pretty good. A few years ago, under Governor Kasich, there was the Local Bridge Partnership Program, which helped basically replace and repair a lot of the structurally deficient bridges that those rural counties and cities were struggling with from a funding standpoint. And my guess, Lloyd can probably answer how many of those bridges were. I know there were hundreds that were replaced as part of that, and it's continuing. That has helped a lot. And Ohio has been very good right now at attacking those bridges. So the grade is better. There's still a lot to be done. As we mentioned, we have the second highest volume of bridges in the United States. And even a small fraction of that, if they're poor, that's still a big number to deal with. So we're still struggling with that. As far as roads in a D, I could defer to someone else on that one.
Craig, how about you on that one?
In part, the differences on the roads, in addition to the condition of the roads, um, they're also measured on their capacity. So when you got congestion, particularly in the urban areas and some of the freight corridors and stuff, that brings the grade down. As Jim, as Lloyd mentioned, ODOT's aware of these and they're working on these pinch points and trying to resolve them. But that's part of what lowers that grade.
Thank you. And then Lloyd and Congressman Balderson, there's a question here about, as we move more to electric vehicles, today our funding mechanisms are really dependent on the gas tax. And so what are your thoughts for future funding mechanisms as we make that move to a new fuel source? So I'll let either one of you jump in.
I'll start here and then I'll yield the rest of the time to the congressman. First off, obviously that's a very great question and it's very telling. So the Ohio legislature actually foresaw some of that, and actually in when they increased the House Bill 62, they also introduced a new fee when people register their electric vehicles and their hybrid vehicles to gather some money from them, because technically those electric vehicles don't pay any gas tax. So that was a way that they did that. So, but clearly there's got to be some other way to capture in the future. And the one that most people have been focusing on at this point is the vehicle miles traveled model. But we have a study here at Odot where we're looking at that right now, where we're working with Federal Highway to study that. There's actually been some pilots out west in the western states along the Pacific, and we're learning from them. But we have a study to see where the future may lie with this. So clearly that's something in the future we got to be looking towards, because as you're right, the gas tax seems to be our return on that each year seems to get lower and lower because of the electric and hybrid vehicles.
Lloyd, I'll just follow up a little bit. I mean, you brought up, and I was going to bring up the same thing, the studies and the pilot programs that have been going on out west, for these electric vehicles, and they've been included in the FAST Acts. We'll look forward to putting them, having that further conversation. It's talked about on a regular basis. As Lloyd said, the state legislature, with what they did in the last transportation budget a couple of years ago, we just need to make sure, and Lloyd, and I know that all of us will do this, and it's educate the legislators, because some of those hybrid gas, I mean, there's a different mix out there that people are not aware of. I had constituents that were reaching out to me that said, Troy, hey, I drive a Lexus, part of it's hybrid, but I put gas in it, predominantly it is gas, and I'm paying a gas tax on it, and then I'm paying an extra fee on top of the hybrid piece of it also. And I feel like, I'm getting shortchanged there a little bit. So, continue to educate folks and how we're going to utilize that. But I think the fee for electric vehicles is a great start, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. So I'm looking for other new questions. I think we addressed what forms of funding has ODOT looked into the future. And then Andrew Brunner is commenting, aren't hybrid or electric vehicles much lighter and therefore do a lot less damage to roads? Therefore, the maintenance needs should be lower?
I can answer that one.
Go ahead, Troy.
No, a Tesla is heavy. A Tesla sedan is heavier than a Ford F-150
Yes.
truck. So no, most of the electric-driven vehicles are heavier. So I mean, and as Lloyd said, I mean, we need to continue to look into this about this fee and how we do it in a way that will get a return on our investment also.
Yeah, you're right, Congressman. The hybrid and electric vehicles are definitely heavier. It's mainly the batteries. There's a significant battery panel on those things that are much heavier because they have an engine and a battery pack. So.
All right, I'm looking for more questions. And Lauren, I think let's dig into this a little bit more. So Lloyd, you talked about the different pilot studies that you're looking at for future funding. And Lauren Logan asks, is there anything more specific that you've looked at for ODOT funding in the future? So is there anything else you can expand on there?
No, it's really what I said there. Pretty much, they're really, clearly, as has been talked about here already, the gas tax is obviously diminishing returns because, with the pandemic and people driving less with the telework option now, I think a lot of that's going to continue in the future. So we're going to get less money from the gas tax when this is all settled with the pandemic. So we're going to have to get a better funding methodology, and that's going to be a challenge because of exactly what you're saying here. People are going to drive fewer miles to go to work every day, but the good news for us is that reduces congestion. The congestion in the AM drive to work and the afternoon drive home from work has not been an issue during the pandemic because of all the people teleworking in their homes. So there's going to be different models and for us to look at in the future.
That gives me the opportunity to pivot to India. And then don't worry, Boris, I'm going to get a question in for you too. And look, right when I was going to ask a public transportation question, India, I was going to talk to you about the role transit can play in being an alternative to congestion and operationally contributing to easing congestion or at least stopping its growth. But then we have this question here asking, more for ODOT, where their thinking is on public transit. But first, India, I'd like you to answer. What role do you see in public transportation and just the overall mobility of residents in Ohio?
Sure, I think that's a fair question. I think it pushes us to be more innovative and it pushes us to be more creative than we have in the industry in years past. It's really telling to see that people are not coming into the central business district as much. State workers are working at home, private companies are working from home, schools are not in session yet. So we really are looking at ways to look at the travel pattern and reconstruct our bus service network, particularly, which is a little bit more mobile. The train is a little bit more stagnant, right? You've got to keep to the track that you have. However, rideshare programs are definitely something that was on the rise right before COVID hit. Right after that, I think we're looking at where those manufacturing sites are located. If people are looking to house their businesses in the suburban areas and the outer ring areas from the city, then it's our duty to be able to look at first mile, last mile kind of conversations and also look at the layout of what we provide. I do think that things like Wi-Fi, abilities to be able to use a virtual work setting while you're riding on public transit is really important to be able to have people feel safe and comfortable while they're using our services as well. But overall, just to answer your question, it pushes us to be more innovative in that space and also take advantage of the space that's available on our buses and trains. If we're not jam-packed like we used to be, now we can have that 6 feet of social distancing, having people feel a little bit safer when they hop on with their mask. We have a new mandate that's coming out and supported by TSA and the CDC. So all of those things are just a culture shift for the industry at large and really looking at how we can work through telecommuting and even people who are hopping on our services for more than an hour now that are maybe going out a little further than they used to. How do we make their ride more comfortable? And how do we make it worth their dollars?
Thank you so much, India. And there's a related question, and it puts the pressure on ODOT on what your role is in advancing public transit in Ohio. And Lloyd, I certainly know that the Office of Transit is working with a lot of those providers around Ohio. Can you explain ODOT's Office of Transit role?
Yes, I can. The Office of Transit in Ohio basically takes the federal dollars that come from FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, and passes those along to the transit agencies throughout Ohio. And we also pass along the sometimes general revenue fund that the legislature gives to the transit agencies, as well as sometimes some of our federal dollars to the transit agencies. So we basically work with local urban as well as the suburban and rural areas with the transit agencies and make sure that the funding that we got, we work with OPTA, the Public Transit Authority throughout Ohio, and work with them to find out the funding mechanisms and get that money to the agencies. We're basically a pass-through agency.
And thank you. And there's a question here wondering how we can communicate some of these needs to our constituents. And I think in the case of transit in particular, the legislature plays such a role in deciding what that funding is for transit. And so it's critically important you share with your local legislator what your interests are with transit and your and the desire for additional funding. So we have a couple of questions on different topics that I want to pivot to. One is, what has been done to improve our power grid in Ohio? And are there any major concerns about the grid? Craig, I'm going to go to you, but maybe Congressman Balderson may have some insight on the power grid as well. I'm not sure. So let's start with you, Craig. Or whomever offered.
Yeah, I'll actually defer that one. That's not my area of expertise.
Okay, I see one of our teams offered to weigh in on that. Congressman, are you familiar with our status?
Not really. I mean, I'm very involved. I mean, that's my big background is energy, and obviously what's going on with our energy right now, and dealing with our utilities. I guess if maybe they could be more precise. I mean, the security of our grid, because I mean, Congressman Mike Kelly and I've been working on a piece of transmitters that were being brought in from overseas, and so I didn't know how far you wanted me to get into something like that. But to me, our grid security is vitally important to make sure that that's protected.
Great. And I know here in Central Ohio, AEP has been working very closely with the Public Utilities Commission to do some modernization. So I know, the energy companies are very focused on that.
Yeah, I think the large
Go ahead, I'm
blackout
sorry.
that we had a long time ago, made the energy companies realize the need for them to modernize their grid and to modernize how their grid, is used. But I think now their challenge is, now that we're dealing with a lot more pull and draw off the grid because of all of our electronic devices, with the future of electronic cars, they need to basically figure out how they can use their existing grid and pipes to be able to carry more power and to do it in a smart fashion. So as you move forward, you're looking more towards smart grids and using technology to try to use our existing capacity in a better way.
Thank you. Boris, I'm going to go to you, and then there are a couple other questions in here I want to get to as well that are very transportation focused. So Boris, you shared with us a lot of the great things that are happening in Ohio to improve our high hazard dams. But if you could ask somebody to communicate something to express that need, what would you advise them to do? How can we help support your programs?
You're seeing a lot of investment, both at the federal, state, and regional level in public-owned dams and infrastructure. And that's a wonderful thing, because those large structures play a critical role in again, flood mitigation, water supply, and other such things for the state. It's interesting that 75% of dams in Ohio are privately owned. And by privately, I'm talking about individuals. It could be a farmstead. It could be a homeowners association. It could be a business or an industry. And that is where, when DNR talks about the 118 high hazard dams that are in need of upgrades, that's where I think there is a fair amount of need, both in updating emergency action plans. And EAPs are essentially a template for, if a condition begins to deteriorate at a dam, what do you do? What do emergency responders do? And how do you handle that? And generally, there's about 25% of dams and high hazard dams in the state do not have current EAPs. I know DNR is working diligently on that, but again, that's just an area where let's make that a priority. Let's try to find some dollars to help those private businesses and individuals, where appropriate, to work through the hazards and upgrades to their dams that are required.
Thank you, Boris. And now I want to pivot to water and wastewater. And I think maybe Craig Mike and the congressman may be able to weigh in here. As you can tell, transportation gets a lot of focus, right? So how do we make sure that these other areas of infrastructure needs, dams, infrastructure, wastewater, clean water, and so forth, how do we make sure those infrastructure needs are also addressed? Congressman.
Marie, I just, it's up to us, and it's up to all of us on this call this morning. I mean, we need to just, we talk about roads and bridges, and I know that's what people understand. That's easy for them to understand. And speaking about the folks that we all represent, but you know, there's just more to it than roads and bridges, and you know, in a lot of these outlying areas, you know, with water and sewer, and I talked a little bit about it at the very beginning, but you know, the rural broadband piece, the public transit piece. I mean, as you just said, the transportation is just big, and it incorporates so many different things. And you know, myself and colleagues that I work with, we're going to keep pushing that and keep talking about water, sewer, the total package, and what we need to talk about. And just, you know, I represent communities where, you know, water is becoming a big issue of how we get it there, and sewer also, especially as you see more and more development happening. And I've got Delaware County, which is the fastest growing county in the state of Ohio, and the growth there is just, you know, we're trying to keep up with it. So we need to continue to focus on that and just make sure that it's part of the conversation. I know our roads and bridges are very important, but we have to keep it all in the conversation.
Thank you, Congressman. I understand you have to leave. You have another commitment. So we have a few minutes left for everybody else, but I just want to thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Marie. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and look forward to working with you. And please reach out to our office. Take care, Lloyd.
All right. Okay, so I've had a couple more questions come in. We've kind of addressed about how do we help get the word out in the communities, and why is it important for all citizens in the state to demand funding for infrastructure support. And I think you've heard a lot of that today, but I think this report card itself can be used. And for actually, Mindy, if you would advance to the next slide, there are a couple links there. The one actually provides the link for the national report card, and I think our assistants have put in the Q&A the link to Ohio's website, where you can get the Ohio report card, both the brochure, and then in a day or two it's going to have the final report there as well. But I think if you use
Marie, a quick note, we just got word. So infrastructurereportcard.org is the national. And if you add a /Ohio, it is now posted and live.
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you. So, so use that as a tool, and, you know, reach out to your legislators. Some are on the phone right now. For those who are interested, particularly in transportation funding, that is going through the legislature in Ohio right now. So now's a good time to reach out. I have a question here about water and wastewater that I think we've already addressed. Another question about transit that really questions why people would go back to transit after COVID. So, and this perception that there's a lot of empty buses out there. So India, can you tackle some of the nuances of that question? What is the benefit if people don't see full buses?
Sure. So I think that that's also a fair question. It's always a question of what's the worth and what's the benefit of public transit to those areas that may not be your New Yorks and Chicagos and the really super dense urban core areas. I think that we have to keep in mind the environmental impact that public transit has on our city and on our surrounding areas. The idea that it does help mitigate congestion, and also thinking about the essential service workers that want to be able to come back into downtown. I know that we in Cleveland have been really working hard to get a handle on the occupancy rates in our downtown urban core, and thinking about, we've got a lot of infrastructure that can handle those kind of folks coming back into downtown and drawing folks to the Cleveland area. And I'm certain that that's very similar in other areas as well. Well, when you look at public transit, most folks that are coming from those high density cities are expecting a robust transit system to be able to get in and around of downtown as well as outlying areas. Reliance on our economic future to be stable is a little disconcerting at the moment, right? We've got to make sure that people are getting stimulus checks, people are getting employment forecasts that are stable. And the lower rates that public transit does afford people, if it's $2 or $2.50 or $3 in some cases, to be able to take a one trip or one seat ride to get across the city is really attractive and advantageous versus putting gas in a car that may fluctuate from day to day. I think that we have to think about public transit is not a poor man's trip, right? It also can be attractive to those folks that are your lawyers and your doctors and more affluent as well, that have a higher paycheck. But it really creates a stability level for those in the community that work in places that don't shut down. And I think that that does transverse past the COVID pandemic scenario. And I would like to just speak on the idea of the Hyperloop. I think I did see in the questions one of the mentioned of a high-speed rail option. That's something that NOACA is looking forward to here in Cleveland. And I've heard in several other areas as well. The benefit of something like that is amazing when you get to thinking about what happens with the commuting between cities and states for folks that are actually thinking about changing the way we do business. So you may no longer have to live in a certain jurisdiction in order to work for a particular company. You might be able to have a construction project going on and half of your workforce is coming from Akron, half of your workforce is coming from Chicago even, and being able to broaden people's horizons when it comes to their economic future. So all of those things I think are very innovative and conceptual in nature, but public transit again has to be able to rise to the occasion to think beyond just going down a couple blocks to get to your grocery store. And I think we have the ability to do that if we keep our minds open.
Thank you, India. And we're just going to give you this last screenshot of the grades. And I just want to put a point. We have, we're 1 minute over. I'm going to go 60 seconds to 2 minutes over, just to say also that as we went through Ohio, ODOT did Ohio's Access Ohio 2045 is Ohio's long-range transportation plan. And what we found in rural communities throughout Ohio was the great demand for public transportation for people trying to get to healthcare, people trying to get to appointments, people in more rural areas not having access to the services they need. And so we had an incredible turnout of people really expressing that desire for transit support. So it's not just an urban issue. All right, so I want to thank all of our panelists who've just really been amazing today. Thank you to those who have tuned in and asked us these great questions. Those of you who received the news release, I encourage you to check it out. And if you have questions, we can connect you with people around the state who are willing to give local perspectives on this report card. So I will wrap up. Thank you again and have a great day. And thank you for your support for Ohio's infrastructure on behalf of ASCE. Have a great day.